Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today we're embarking on a truly monumental journey. We're literally digging deep into a profound, often overlooked history, one that fundamentally reshaped an entire continent. We're talking about the enigmatic Kurgan cultures of the Pontic-Caspian steppe. This deep dive, as always, is meticulously crafted just for you, our dedicated listener. We've gone through a single, really comprehensive source, Kurgan Horizon, Bronze Age Europe steppe transformation. Our mission today is to unearth the most important insights, the surprising facts about how these ancient nomadic pastoralists, people who lived millennia ago, how they weren't just a footnote, not at all. They were a revolutionary force, fundamentally transforming the demography, the language, the culture of Bronze Age Europe. So prepare for an engaging exploration. It's going to offer, I think, a completely new lens through which to view the very foundations of what we often call Western civilization. So let's begin by defining our subject. When we talk about the Kurgan cultures, what are we actually referring to?
Right. We're talking about a vast, interconnected complex. Think nomadic pastoral societies.
Okay, nomadic pastoral. So lives revolving around animals.
Exactly. Entirely around their animals. Herds of cattle, sheep, goats, and crucially, horses. Their whole existence was intrinsically linked to movement, following pastures across these immense stretches of land.
And where did they first appear?
They first emerge around the mid-4th millennium BCE. The region, it's the Pontic-Caspian steppe. You picture a map, it's that vast, fertile crescent stretching across modern-day Ukraine, southern Russia, and Kazakhstan. That's the heartland.
Wow, okay. And from there?
From that heartland, they began this astonishing expansion. It was slow, maybe, but relentless, spread over 3 millennia. Ultimately, their influence, their presence, it extended across pretty much all of Europe and even reached into northern West Asia. It's vast.
And the name itself, Kurgan.
Like
That comes from something specific they left behind, doesn't it?
It does. It's a direct nod to their most enduring, most distinctive legacy, their burial mounds.
Right, the burial mounds. But these weren't just simple graves.
No, not at all. A kurgan is a type of tumulus, a large mound, earth and stones piled high. And underneath, often intricate mud-plastered pit chambers where the deceased were laid to rest.
It sounds simple, just earth and stone, but you're saying they're much more significant.
Oh, absolutely. What's truly remarkable about these kurgans is they were far more than just burial sites or, feats of engineering. They were potent symbols. They really embodied a complete societal transformation.
How so?
Well, building them required significant communal effort. That points to complex social organization, a distinctive ideology. In fact, these earth mounds, they're like physical manifestations of what might have been the most powerful demographic transformation in European history.
Wow. So not just a burial place.
No, a statement of power, belief, enduring legacy. Everything wrapped up in that mound.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. How did these seemingly simple earth mounds become such a concrete symbol of something so monumental?
What's fascinating here is that they weren't just a technological thing or purely ceremonial. They embodied a complete societal shift, influencing everything from power structures right through to belief systems.
It's just astounding to think about the sheer scale of influence these ancient people exerted. And our main evidence comes from how they buried their dead.
It really speaks to the deep significance these communities attached to these earthworks. They literally shaped landscapes and, well, ultimately, the course of history itself.
So to really get a handle on this Kurgan influence, we need to look at it over time, right? It wasn't just one culture appearing and disappearing.
Exactly. It's not monolithic. It's a succession of related groups, each building on the innovations, the practices of those who came before, like watching this intricate historical tapestry unfold over millennia.
Where did the story begin?
Our journey starts with what we call the precursor period, roughly 4,500 to 3,500 BCE. This is when the foundational cultures start to appear, names like Sredny Stog and Kalinsk.
Sredny Stog, Kavelinsk. Okay. And where were they?
You find their early settlements mainly along the big river lines, the Dnipro and the Volga, crucial arteries, for movement, resources. And these early groups, they were already innovating. We see some of the earliest copper metallurgy tools, weapons.
Copper, okay.
What else? Also some of the first stone battle axes. These become really emblematic of later steppe cultures. And significantly, they practiced horse sacrifice. Even this early, it hints at the profound importance of horses.
Here's where it gets really interesting, I think. That horse connection. Imagine the moment humans first truly mastered the horse. what that unlocked.
It's pivotal, and we actually have direct archaeological evidence from this precursor period pointing to it.
Oh, yeah. What kind of evidence?
At a site called Derevka, a Sredny Stog site, archaeologists found horse teeth, and these teeth had distinctive bit wear.
Bit wear from writing.
That's the interpretation. These subtle marks are considered some of the earliest solid clues for horse riding.
Wow. So the birth of horsemanship, traceable to tiny marks on ancient teeth. That changes everything, doesn't it? Travel, warfare, herding.
Fundamentally, communication across continents even. It's a remarkable window into a truly revolutionary period.
Okay, so that's the precursor stage. What comes next?
From that formative period, we move into what's widely seen as the apex of their power and influence. The classic Kurgan period, or the Yamnaya horizon, this is roughly 3300 to 2600 BCE.
Yamnaya. I've definitely heard that name. Also called pit grave culture.
That's right, from their burials. And the Yamnaya didn't just expand, they came to dominate the entire Pontic-Caspian steppe. It's a huge area. And their burials, which give them the name, share these strikingly common features across that vast territory. It suggests a shared cultural identity.
What kind of features?
You find these deep pit chambers, often with wooden beam ceilings, quite complex structures, all covered by those distinctive conical oval tumuli, the mounds built above ground.
Okay.
Inside, the remains were frequently sprinkled with red ochre, that vibrant pigment.
Why red ochre?
We'll get more into the symbolism later, but likely tied to blood, life, regeneration. And compellingly, we find evidence of horse and cattle sacrifice within the graves. Offerings, status symbols.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, Yamnaya is more than just a culture.
Much more. They represent a fundamental reorganization of society and technology across this vast landscape. They seem to unify disparate groups through these shared practices and some crucial advancements.
Like what advancement?
Well, this era sees critical technological leaps, most notably the appearance of the first wheeled wagon traces.
Ah, the wheel. Famously depicted on the Bronzes tot, right?
Exactly. That pot is incredible. It basically rewrote the timeline for the wheel in Europe, and we even find intricate models of four-wheeled wagons buried with the dead, showing how central this technology was becoming.
Amazing. So after this Yamnaya peak, things start to change again.
Yes, as often happens, we enter a period of scattering and diversification, the late Kurgan period, roughly 2600 to 2000 BCE. The Yamnaya influence doesn't vanish, but it branches out, lays the groundwork for huge parts of later European development.
How did it branch out?
Primarily, we trace two major avenues of expansion. First, a Western branch. These groups migrated directly into Central and Northern Europe.
Into Europe proper. And this leads to...
This immense migratory wave gives rise to incredibly influential cultures like the corded ware and bell beaker complexes.
Corded ware and bell beaker. Names that come up a lot in European prehistory. Their genetic and linguistic legacies are still with us, right?
Very much so. We'll definitely get into that. At the same time, there's an eastern branch.
Okay, where do they go?
They spread dynamically towards the Urals and the Caucasus, forming distinct, powerful cultures like the Poltavka and the Catacomb cultures.
Poltavka and Catacomb. Different names, different regions.
Yeah, and they had some distinct features. The catacomb burials, for instance, had these unique, niche-like catacomb structures carved into the side of the grave pit. Really intriguing architectural choice, suggesting specific beliefs about the afterlife.
And Poltavka.
The Poltavka culture became known for its rich metal goods, shows advancements in metallurgy in that eastern zone.
So what does this all mean for the future of Europe? It's like watching an ancient family tree branch out across the continent.
That's a great way to put it. Each branch carries elements of that parent Yamnaya culture, but they adapt, evolve, become distinct identities. But all springing from that shared steppe root, carrying forward those core elements of innovation and culture. To really get the Kurgan peoples, you have to understand the environment they lived in. It was demanding.
The Pontic-Caspian steppe, what was it like?
Characterized by its rich soils, these chestnut loess soils. But the climate, it has this really distinct seasonal pattern.
Oh, so?
It bursts into vibrant green with the spring and autumn rains, lush grazing then. But then the summer, it dries out dramatically. Scorching heat becomes arid.
So a limited window of good pasture.
Exactly. This green window, as it's sometimes called, was fleeting, which meant a constant, relentless search for fresh pasture was essential. This environment basically dictated their lifestyle. Semi-nomadic herding wasn't really a choice. It was a necessity for survival. for their herds and for them.
It's incredible how much geography shapes destiny, isn't it?
Yeah.
It just dictates how societies have to organize themselves.
Absolutely. And speaking of environmental pressures, the source highlights a really significant event, the 4.2 kiloyear drought event.
4.2 kiloyear. So around 2200 BCE.
That's right. And this wasn't just a dry spell. It was a profound, prolonged climate shift. Huge consequences.
Like what?
Well, it significantly pushed the steppe vegetation band northward, altered the whole ecological map. This stress seems to have accelerated cultural circulation after the catacomb period, as groups were forced to adapt, move, interact.
So it spurred change.
It looks like it. And ultimately, it prompted this crucial transition towards the forest-steppe axis, that more wooded zone, which characterized the later Srubnaya period. Communities were seeking more stable environments.
It's a powerful reminder, isn't it, that climate change isn't just a modern issue. It profoundly shaped ancient history, too, sometimes maybe more than battles or kings.
Definitely. So, within this dynamic, demanding environment, what was their economy built on?
The animals, right? You said pastoral.
Overwhelmingly. Centered around these massive, mobile herds. Horses, sheep, goats, cattle. That was their wealth, their sustenance.
But they weren't just herders. You mentioned innovation.
Correct. They developed critical new products that were crucial for sustaining that nomadic life year-round. Things that enabled them to thrive even while moving huge distances.
Like what sort of products?
Innovations like processing wool from a specific breed, these red-headed sheep, and crucially, the production of felt.
Felt. Why was felt so important?
Imagine the utility, warmth, portability. Felt allowed them to create portable shelters, yurts maybe, warm clothing, sturdy blankets, all vital for enduring the diverse climates they encountered on the steppes. These weren't minor things. They were the practical tech that made permanent, year-round nomadism truly viable.
Okay, that makes sense. And of course, the horse. We have to come back to the horse.
We do. Because while we saw early hints in the precursor period, the truly definitive second wave of horse domestication seems to emerge later.
When and where?
In the Volga-Don plain, between about 2300 and 2000 BCE, this was monumental, because this specific lineage, which we now know genetically as Don M2, it didn't just add to the horse population, it formed the very core of today's entire domestic horse population, worldwide.
Wait, all domestic horses today trace back to this Dom2 lineage from the Volga-Don.
Almost entirely, it's incredible. This raises that huge question. How fundamentally did this refined horse domestication change everything? Not just for the Kurgans, but for human civilization's trajectory.
It's hard to even imagine.
And recent genomic research, like from 2024, has given us this fascinating cutting-edge detail. It conclusively shows modern horses originated almost entirely from this Western steppe DOM2 lineage.
So, not the bow tie horses from Central Asia. I thought that was a leading theory.
It was, but the new data shows the bow tie contribution is tiny, less than 3%. This new understanding shows this direct, powerful genetic link between these specific steppe peoples and basically every domestic horse alive today. Racehorses, ponies, workhorses, all of them.
That's a staggering legacy, just from domesticating one animal lineage so effectively.
It really is a testament to their impact.
Okay, beyond the horse, what about other technologies? Metal.
Yes, they were also accomplished masters of metal. We see this crucial transition in their toolkit, moving from arsenical copper, which is okay, to the much stronger, more versatile tin bronze.
Tin bronze. That's a big step up.
Huge. And this development is clearly seen along the Yamnaya cultural line. It seems they were heavily influenced by interaction with the technologically advanced Maykop culture.
Maykop. Where were they?
Nearby, in the Caucasus region. The Maykop culture itself gives us these spectacular examples of early elite power and metallurgical skill, like the amazing gold-silver bull figurines found in a huge Maykop kurgan, like 10 meters high. These weren't just trinkets. Dazzling displays of wealth, craftsmanship, ceremonial power. They hint at the incredible skill these early metalworkers had, skills the Kurgans shared and adapted.
Gold and silver bulls.
Yeah.
Impressive. And then the other huge innovation, the wheel.
Ah, yes, the wheel. Its impact just cannot be overstated.
And we have evidence beyond just archaeology, right? Linguistic evidence.
We do. The Proto-Indo-European vocabulary, PIE, the reconstructed ancestor language, it preserves terms directly related to this tech. We find common PIE terms for complex bits like four-wheeled wagon differentials, ox yokes. The language itself remembers how important this was.
Wow. The words themselves carry the history.
Exactly. It underscores the wheel's absolute importance as a core innovation for these mobile societies.
And we do have that definitive archaeological evidence, too. You mentioned the Bronys's pot.
Yes. That engraving on the bronzes pot, just a clay vessel, dates way back to 3400, 3300 BCE. It's not ambiguous. It is the clearest, most unmistakable depiction of a wheeled vehicle in Europe from that time.
Think about that. A simple clay pot, millennia old, giving us such a crystal clear window into this ancient, game-changing technology.
Yeah.
It's a true aha moment.
It really is incredible how these seemingly mundane objects tell us so much about these revolutionary steps that fundamentally reshaped transport, trade, everything.
So let's go back into those kurgans, the burial mounds. You said they're like historical archives. What else do they tell us beyond just burial practices?
They tell us so much. We have to remember these were central focal points of social memory, way more than just places to put the dead. Every detail, the construction, how the body was placed, it was all imbued with meaning, reflecting this deeply held spiritual worldview.
You mentioned the body placement on the right side, facing southeast.
Typically, yes, within that inner pit chamber, often covered by wooden planks, and that orientation, facing southeast almost invariably, plus the red ochre sprinkled over them.
What's the thinking behind that? The orientation, the ochre?
Well, the red ochre, as we touched on, is widely interpreted as symbolizing the cycle of blood, life, vitality, even in death. A connection to regeneration, perhaps. And the sun-facing orientation probably symbolized the soul's journey, maybe its union with light, or following a specific path in the afterlife connected to the sun's movement.
So really thought out, intentional.
Absolutely. What's fascinating is the sheer intentionality, the sophisticated symbolism embedded in every aspect. It reflects this coherent spiritual worldview connecting the deceased to cosmic forces, nature's cycles, and the lineage of their ancestors.
And around the graves, you sometimes find standing stones.
Yes, the anthropomorphic stelae, known as balbals, like silent, stony sentinel standing guard.
Anthropomorphic means human-like.
Roughly, yes. Stone figures, sometimes quite intricately carved, placed in and around the mounds. They symbolize the oversight, the enduring presence of ancestors, guardians, or maybe representations of the departed themselves.
Were they just symbolic, or did they convey information?
They definitely conveyed information. They weren't just decoration. They were crucial communicators of status and identity. We see relief carvings on their distinctive archtops depicting specific items, scythes, bows, swords. These clearly indicated the gender and the social rank of the person buried nearby.
Wow. So you could basically read the status off the stone.
To some extent, yes. It's incredible how much social information they encoded into these stones, information that's lasted for millennia. And this practice, aligning these balbals, sometimes even based on the number of enemies killed. You can trace it directly to much later Turkic and Mongolian traditions on the steppe.
Really? That far forward in time?
Thousands of years later. It speaks to this deeply rooted cultural lineage, this persistent worldview connecting martial skill with ancestral veneration right across the Eurasian steppe. A remarkable continuity.
Okay, shifting slightly, you mentioned the catacomb culture earlier with their unique burials. Can you tell us more about that?
Right, the catacomb mystery. Their graves had this very distinctive feature, a niche carved into the side of the main burial pit.
A niche, like a little side chamber?
Exactly. It's a unique architectural choice for a tomb. And it seems to reflect a very specific, profound belief. The thinking is that this niche wasn't just a recess, but was seen as a literal gateway to the afterlife for the deceased, a portal for their spirit to pass into the next realm.
A gateway.
Interesting. But what's truly surprising is how far the specific burial form seems to have reached. Traces of it, or very similar concepts, can even be found in early Helladic graves. In Mycenae.
Mycenae. In Greece, that's thousands of kilometers away.
It is. It signals the astonishingly far reach of Kurgan cultural interaction, whether it was long-distance trade, small groups moving, or just the exchange of powerful ideas. The echoes of their burial practices somehow stretched all the way to the Aegean. It shows a truly interconnected ancient world.
Incredible. So what else do the graves tell us about their society? The social structure?
Well, the sources confirm these societies were overwhelmingly organized into patrilineal clans.
Patrilineal, meaning lineage and status passed down the male line.
Typically, yes. Inheritance, social standing, mostly followed the father's side, a common structure in many early societies, and we see clear evidence of hierarchy in the burials themselves.
How so?
Elite Kurgans, the really big ones, often feature a single prominent chief burial, signifying a leader. Then, around these central burials, you find adjacent, smaller kurgans. These contain burials of kin or maybe important retainers. It illustrates a clear social pyramid.
And the sacrifices reflected this too. You mentioned horses were special.
Exactly. While sacrificing sheep or goats seems pretty common as a funerary offering, finding horse burials specifically signified exceptionally high prestige, a very clear marker of top status, wealth, power, especially in these horse-centric communities.
Okay, so status was clearly marked. What about children?
Ah, yes. There's a rather touching detail that speaks volumes. Wheeled miniature toys found in many Yamnaya kurgans.
Little toy wagons.
Exactly. These aren't just random playthings dropped in by grieving families. Their inclusion, especially in potentially elite burials, reflects the status children and youth held in these societies. And it subtly underlines the profound symbolic value of the wheel, that core technology, even in early life. It shows that the innovations shaping their adult world were introduced and valued right from childhood.
It truly is like looking directly into a vibrant ancient window, isn't it?
It really is.
Through all these meticulous details, the grave orientation, the offerings, the artifacts, even the toys, we piece together their lives, their beliefs, their social structure. From the chief down to the child, they left this remarkably detailed, poignant record in the land of their ancestors. Okay, so we've looked at the archaeology, the burials, the technology, but one of the biggest ideas linking the Kurgans to a massive global impact is about language, right? The Kurgan hypothesis.
Indeed. This is a hugely influential hypothesis, first proposed by the brilliant archaeologist Marija Gimbutas back in the 1950s. And it's gained immense traction since then, especially now with powerful reinforcing evidence from modern genetics.
That's the core idea.
Its central tenet places the homeland of the Proto-Indo-European language family, PIE, firmly within the Yamnaya steppe. It posits this was the geographic cradle from which this vast language family spread.
Proto-Indo-European, the ancestor of languages spoken by billions today, from English and Spanish to Hindi and Russian.
Exactly that family. And the evidence supporting the steppe homeland is multifaceted. It starts with linguistic insights. Reconstructed PIE vocabulary shares common terms for revolutionary concepts deeply tied to the Kurgan lifestyle and their innovations.
Like what kind of terms?
Words for the wheel, the domesticated horse, sophisticated milk processing, beeswax, key metals like gold and copper. These aren't trivial words. They represent this whole suite of interconnected, game-changing technologies and practices that were central to the Yamnaya world.
Okay, so the words match the lifestyle. But what makes that specifically point to the steppe?
What's really crucial and offers a powerful piece of the puzzle is the absence of some of these specific terms, particularly for the wheel, horse, and certain metals in the Anatolian branch of Indo-European languages.
Anatolian, like Hittite, spoken in ancient Turkey.
Precisely. This absence isn't just random, it carries huge implications. It strongly suggests the Anatolian branch separated much, much earlier from the main PIE linguistic trunk, probably in the early 4th millennium BCE, before these specific innovations became widespread across the main steppe area.
So they split off before the full Kurgan package was complete.
That's the idea. This early split likely occurred from different centers, maybe North Caucasian, Maykop-like areas, indicating a separate, earlier trajectory for that language branch. It strengthens the case for the later innovations being tied to the main steppe PIE group.
Fascinating. And genetics backs this up now.
Powerfully. Recent genetic studies, especially Y-DNA studies tracing the male line, provide astonishing clarity. They've shown Yamnaya males predominantly carried specific genetic markers, mainly R1b, Z2103, and I2A.
Okay. Specific genetic signatures.
Yes. Then later, the male genetic stock of the corded ware culture, which emerged as a direct cultural and likely demographic descendant moving into Europe, largely carried the R1a M417 marker, another specific signature related but distinct.
So you can track these markers moving.
Exactly. These are like genetic fingerprints, letting scientists meticulously trace ancient migrations. And what these studies reveal is a dramatic demographic shift in Central Europe. Corded ware groups migrating between roughly 2900 and 2400 BCE show an astonishing 70–80% steppe ancestry.
70 to 80%. That's huge.
It's massive. They rapidly, profoundly diluted the genetic footprint of the local Neolithic farmer lineages who'd been there for millennia. In many regions, it looks less like gradual mixing and more like a profound population replacement, a complete overhaul of the genetic landscape.
And here's where this ancient story connects directly to you, listening right now, in a really remarkable way.
Recent genomic data shows that this Yamnaya genetic component itself, a mix of Eastern hunter-gatherer and Caucasian farmer ancestry, still makes up a significant chunk of the current Western European gene pool.
How significant?
Around 35–45%. It's not a small trace. It's a massive foundational contribution. So if you have Western European ancestry, a huge part of your genetic makeup literally traces back to these ancient steppe nomads.
Wow. And this genetic wave ties into the language spread.
That's the strong correlation. Northwestern European languages, in particular, are widely believed to have spread with this powerful demographic wave. It's truly incredible to see this ancient genetic and linguistic echo reverberating so clearly today, fundamentally shaping who we are and how we speak. But it raises that important question, doesn't it? What does it mean to see such a clear genetic footprint aligning so well with a linguistic theory?
Yeah. Is it proof language spread with people? Or is it more complex? Maybe ideas and tech transformed societies and then they adopted the language.
It forces us to consider that deep entanglement of human movement, genetic legacy, and the words we use. It's a powerful testament to the Kurgan expansion's reach.
Now, you mentioned the Makop culture earlier, the neighbors in the Caucasus. How do they fit into this genetic picture? Were they assimilated?
That's an important clarification from recent DNA findings. Despite their proximity and undeniable cultural influence, especially in metallurgy and ceremony, the Makop people themselves were not genetically assimilated by the Yamnaya. They kept their distinct genetic profile, which highlights that cultural exchange, even significant technological transfer, doesn't always mean genetic merging or population replacement. It shows a more nuanced interplay of influence and distinct identities coexisting, at least for a time.
Okay, so let's trace the actual roots now. The waves of expansion that took this Kurgan culture, language, and genetics across Europe and beyond. It wasn't just one push, right?
No, not at all. It was a series of profound, successive migrations that fundamentally reshaped the continent.
Where did the first main wave go?
The first notable expansion seems to have been through the southern gateway, along the Balkan-Danube corridor. This happened roughly between 3100 and 2800 BCE. That's when we see the initial Yamnaya groups appearing along the Danube River.
And what was the impact there?
It seems significant and often disruptive. We find clear archaeological traces of conflict. And, crucially, the construction of those characteristic Kurgan monuments starts appearing near the huge Tripoli mega-villages.
Triple, those were large farming settlements.
Yeah.
Very different from the Kurgans.
Exactly. Exceptionally large, sprawling settlements built by early agricultural communities in modern-day Bulgaria, Romania, the Hungarian plains. So this indicates a transformative, maybe often fraught, encounter between the incoming mobile steppe nomads and these established filing societies.
Okay, so that's the southern route. What about north?
Then we see the northern advance, a massive wave sweeping into Central and Northern Europe between about 2900 and 2300 BCE. This is the era of the widespread corded ware migrations, named after their pottery style.
Corded ware. And how far did they reach?
An astonishing distance, from the Baltics all the way across to the Rhine River in the west.
And their legacy. You mentioned genetics and language.
Undeniable and pervasive. These migrations firmly established those R1a and R1b paternal lines, the Y chromosome markers across that entire region, shaped the genetic makeup for millennia, and linguistically, profound. These migrations shaped the foundational precursors of what would eventually become the huge Germanic and Balto-Slavic language families.
So English, German, Swedish, Russian, Polish, Lithuanian, their deep roots trace back here.
That's the strong argument. A pivotal moment where ancient movements laid the deep groundwork for major language families still spoken by hundreds of millions.
Wow. Did the expansion stop there?
No, it extended even further, across the Channel into the Isles, Britain, and the Atlantic coast. This is roughly 2450 to 2000 BCE.
Britain. This is linked to the bell beaker phenomenon.
Exactly, that broad archaeological complex, the bell beaker culture. Recent genomic analysis shows it's closely connected to Kurgan-derived populations moving westward, ultimately originating from the steppe. And the genomic data from Britain for this period is just astonishing. It paints a picture of profound transformation. It's determined that the Yamnaya-derived R1b 312 lineage, a specific branch of that R1b marker, replaced nearly 90% of the island's existing Neolithic population.
90% replaced.
Almost completely. It's truly mind-blowing, isn't it?
That's not migration. That's almost a population reset.
It's about as close as you can get in prehistory. It wasn't just gradual change or mixing. It was a near-complete transformation of the demographic landscape of an entire island, stemming from these movements that started on the steppe. It fundamentally changes how we see the origins of the British people, highlights the sheer scale of the Kurgan impact, like watching a population literally reinvented.
Unbelievable. Was the expansion only westward?
No, there was also a significant eastward-bound movement towards the Urals and into Central Asia, occurring between 2500 and 2000 BCE.
What happened there?
We trace a clear cultural succession. The Poltavka and Abashevo cultures, themselves descendants of earlier steppe groups, they give rise to the incredibly influential Sintashta Andronovo cultures.
Natasha Andronova. They're important because
They are recognized as the crucial ancestors of the late Bronze Age Indo-Iranian branch of languages.
Indo-Iranian. So languages like Sanskrit, Persian.
Exactly. Tongues spoken across vast swaths of South Asia and Iran. Their origins trace back to these eastern steppe expansions. And from this dynamic eastern expansion, we also pinpoint another huge innovation, the invention of the horse-drawn war chariot.
The chariot. That came from here too.
The earliest clear evidence points to the Sintashta culture. This wasn't just a new cart, it was a game-changing weapon platform. It would revolutionize warfare for millennia, completely altering the scale, speed, strategic possibilities of conflict across Eurasia, from Europe to India. Another massive Kurgan-related legacy.
Let's circle back to the worldview, the beliefs.
Yeah.
Those Kurgans, the artifacts, they're not just practical, they're windows into how these people saw the cosmos, right?
Absolutely. Their cosmology, their understanding of the universe was deeply embedded and really eloquently expressed in their architecture, especially the Kurgans.
How so? You mentioned the mound as the dome of heaven.
Exactly. The Kurgan itself, that imposing circular tumulus, wasn't just seen as a pile of earth. It was viewed symbolically as the dome of heaven, mirroring the celestial sphere above them. And conversely, the inner pit chamber, that intimate space where the deceased lay, that was seen as the sacred land of ancestors, a connection back to the origins of their lineage.
Heaven above, ancestors below, all in the grave structure.
Precisely. If you connect this to the bigger picture, it shows this profoundly coherent, integrated belief system. Their monumental architecture directly reflected their cosmic understanding, kind of blurring the lines between the earthly realm and the divine or ancestral realm. The very act of burial becomes this cosmic statement, aligning the individual with the greater order of the universe and the enduring legacy of their forefathers.
What about their art? Did they have a distinct artistic style?
They did, and while maybe not as famous as some later cultures, it was foundational and incredibly impactful. We see very early striking examples of what becomes the distinctive animal style art.
Animal style, like depictions of animals.
Yes, dynamic depictions. Perhaps best exemplified by those captivating gold-silver bull figurines found in the Makop Kurgans we mentioned.
Right, the bulls.
These weren't just pretty objects or simple representations. This early animal style served as a powerful archetype, a seminal artistic tradition that would profoundly influence the later renowned Sith-Saka animal style.
Scythians and Saka, those later horse-riding warrior cultures of the steppe.
Exactly. They emerged millennia later, but their famous art echoed these ancient Kurgan forms. It shows this long-lasting aesthetic and thematic continuity across the Eurasian grasslands, centered on animals, particularly powerful ones.
That's fascinating. Any other connections, maybe through objects like weapons?
Yes, what's genuinely interesting are the surprising parallels in weaponry. Yamnaya and catacomb spearheads, for instance. They show striking similarities in form and design with specific weapon types from the famous Shaftgrave period in Mycenae.
Mycenae again. Similar spearheads.
The similarities are notable. This archaeological detail is incredibly telling. It reveals that Kurgan cultural transmission, or influence at least, extended remarkably far.
How would that happen? Trade. Warriors moving.
It could be established trade networks carrying not just goods, but designs, ideas. Or perhaps the movement of warrior groups who shared certain martial traditions or technologies. Either way, it suggests this deep-seated connection across vast distances. It shows the ancient world was far more interconnected than we often imagine, with these cultural threads stretching from the steppe right down to the Mediterranean.
History is never static, is it? It's always evolving, especially with new science. And Kurgan studies are no exception. Despite dealing with such ancient times, genetics seems to be really shaking things up.
Absolutely. It's a dynamic field. New discoveries are constantly refining the narrative, challenging old assumptions, adding incredible nuance. Recent genomics, in particular, is forcing us to rethink some things.
Like what? What are the big debates right now?
Well, one of the most fascinating and active debates, really fueled by groundbreaking genomic studies from just 2023, 2024, is what some are calling the not fathers but grandfathers hypothesis.
Okay, not fathers, but grandfathers. What does that mean?
It questions a key assumption. Does that huge steppe ancestry we see in the corded ware groups, the ones who moved into Europe, does it come directly and exclusively from the main Yamnaya population? Or could it partly come from an even older, sort of pre-Yamnaya source population on the steppe?
So Yamnaya might be the main carriers, but the genetic source itself is even older.
That's the idea being explored. It's a subtle but potentially crucial distinction.
Okay, let's really unpack this because it's a perfect example of how science deepens the story. Just when we thought, okay, Yamnaya migration explains corded ware, new data says, well, maybe the source population was slightly earlier.
Precisely. These very recent genomic studies suggest a significant portion of this steppe ancestry might actually originate from older groups like Sredni Stog or the Repin culture, which predate the full Yamnaya expansion. It doesn't negate the Yamnaya's massive impact as the vehicle of expansion, perhaps, but it suggests the foundational genetic lineage of these steppe peoples might have deeper roots, developing over a longer period before those huge migrations kicked off.
That's why we keep diving deeper, right? The story is always evolving, becoming richer, more intricate than we first thought. History as a living inquiry.
Definitely. And related to this, the narrative around horse domestication is also undergoing significant refinement, again, thanks to these precise genomic insights.
How so? You mentioned the bowtie horses are less important now.
Yes, it's now definitively clear from the genetic data that horses from the bowtie culture in Central Asia, once thought to be the primary ancestors, contributed less than 3% to the modern domestic horse lineage.
Less than 3%. That basically overturns that theory.
It does. It drastically rewrites that chapter. Instead, the main domesticating population for virtually all modern horses is now understood to have originated much closer to the Kurgan heartland from those pre-Yamnaya groups in the Volga-Don basin. So it cements the steppe's role not just as an early center of horsemanship, but as the true crucible of modern horse domestication, which then had this massive global impact.
Amazing. Okay, one last area of debate.
Yeah.
That interaction between Kurgans and farmers, particularly the Tripoli culture in the Balkans, was it all conflict?
That's an ongoing, compelling discussion. What was the precise relationship between the decline or destruction of those massive AAA mega-settlements and the advance of Kurgans into the Balkans? Was it straightforward conquest or something else?
What's the newer thinking?
Well, this raises that broader question again. How much were these huge ancient changes driven by direct human conflict versus larger, maybe less visible environmental pressures?
Like that 4.2 kill-a-year drought.
Exactly. New insights from recent pollen analysis and isotope data are strengthening the possibility that climate stress played a huge role. It might have been more a case of climate-stressed integration, adaptation, resource competition, rather than just straightforward farmer-herder warfare across the board. The environmental challenges likely forced interactions, migrations, transformations in ways we're only beginning to fully appreciate. It suggests a more complex, perhaps less uniformly violent encounter between these diverse societies as they both grappled with major environmental shifts. Hashtag tag outro.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's just abundantly clear, isn't it? The Kurgan societies, born on that Eurasian steppe millennia ago, their impact on Bronze Age Europe was profound, multifaceted, and incredibly enduring.
They weren't just a fleeting presence or some local phenomenon. They were a catalyst for radical innovations that literally changed the course of human history.
Horsemanship, the wheeled wagon.
Wool production, early bronze metallurgy, the list goes on.
But their legacy runs so much deeper than just tech, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They left behind those monumental burial landscapes, transforming the physical topography of vast regions. They were instrumental in spreading Proto-Indo-European languages, laying the linguistic foundations for so much of Eurasia, and they fundamentally transformed the Western and Northern Eurasian gene pool. They really formed the demographic bedrock, influenced that whole horse and sky-themed mythology that echoes for millennia, shaped the core material culture, weapons, ornaments, those game-changing chariots of Bronze Age Europe.
So let's bring it full circle, right back to the present. Those Kurgan tumuli, the mounds, they still rise from the plains today, silent, enduring reminders of those ancient pastoral warrior ancestors. Their enduring legacy, and in a very real sense, your enduring legacy, if you share that ancestry, it lives on. In our languages and our genes, woven into the fabric of our shared culture, it's a connection across millennia. Profound and actually deeply personal when you think about it.
It really is.
So as you go about your day, maybe on your commute, maybe just thinking, consider this. How much of who we are today, the words we speak, the very genetic makeup of our bodies, is an echo of these ancient, powerful movements across the Eurasian steppes? And what other hidden deep dives are waiting out there, ready to reshape our understanding of history and maybe even ourselves? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Kurgan horizon.